good columnist is supposed to spark a response from readers, but the line between provocative and outrageous is subjective. And when a column generates a strong reaction, opinion page editors have to decide whether it was the right reasons or not. Bruce Jenner's very public transition to Caitlyn Jenner on the cover of Vanity Fair certainly got the world's attention.
My brain is much more female than it is male. It's hard for people to understand that.
Press coverage of Jenner's gender transition has been mostly favorable. Any whispers of dissent have come from the predictable voices.
We should not be celebrating this. We should not be lionizing this.
But now several female columnists are pushing back. The Boston Globe's Ellen Goodman called Jenner's glam cover sexist. Nail polish does not a woman make, chided Eleanor Burkett in the New York Times. The Pittsburgh Post-Gazette's Jennifer Graham went so far as to declare Caitlyn Jenner is still a mister, writing that many Americans view gender dysphoria as a psychiatric disorder, not a laudable lifestyle choice. Graham's column and snarky tone caused a furor, with some calling it irresponsible or hate speech. Editorial page editor Tom Wasilewski has dismissed calls to fire Graham, saying, "We have a robust opinion section, and we're used to strong reactions." As for Graham herself, she calls it, quote, all in a day's work. First, I want to say that in order to really get the full flavor of this column, you really have to read the whole thing, because there are a lot of references to freak shows, and back in the 1930s, somebody like Caitlyn Jenner might have been part of a circus show. So there those kinds of things. She likened her to this very odd woman that was completely covered in hair that used to be part of a freak show. But you were her editor, Jennifer Graham. She did some freelancing at the Boston Globe. I mean, would you ever say it? Would you, first of all, would you have run that column? And would you ever say, you know, you're going too far here?
I wouldn't have, to the first part of the question, I would not have run the column as it appeared. I think there are a lot of people out there who feel uncomfortable, generally conservative people, who feel uncomfortable or put off by the Caitlyn Jenner emergence. And there's an opening, I think, for an opinion column that talks about that in a forthright way. This column wasn't that. The sneering tone was, I think, demeaning. I also think that there's certainly the opportunity with an opinion column. Everything's edited. You have to run it by your editor. The editor has to accept it. And this was a situation where a longer conversation between Graham and her editor hopefully would have produced a better result, because I think it is a legitimate subject of opinion journalism.
For what it's worth, I think, in addition to urging people to read the Jennifer Graham column, I would say go read the Eleanor Burkett column in the New York Times, which I thought was just fantastic. And what she highlighted was, you know, well, as Dante says, a lot of discomfort with transgender stuff comes from the right. There's also this tension between feminism and the transgender rights movement. And there are women who bristle at the idea of someone like Bruce Jenner, now Caitlyn Jenner, saying, well, my brain is much more female than male, because, you know, they don't believe that there is some sort of inherent essential difference between female and male brains. Another point that Eleanor Burkett made in her piece, which it was like the smart, sophisticated, respectful version of what Jennifer Graham wanted to do. Another point she made is that when you're a woman, you grow up with an aggregate set of experiences that shape who you are. And for Bruce Jenner to suddenly identify as Caitlyn Jenner or become Caitlyn Jenner implies that he's shared in those same experiences when he has not. So worth a read. Yeah, Jennifer Graham may be worth a read as a cautionary tale.
The Eleanor Burkett commentary was excellent, as was the Ellen Goodman commentary. Both interesting, thoughtful takes on Caitlyn Jenner's coming out that were not as positive about all of this as much of the media has been. As far as Jennifer Graham goes, one of the things that concerns me is that it almost seems as though she believes that because she got a rise out of people, she's doing her job. Well, you can always get a rise out of people writing something hideously offensive and inappropriate. And this fell into that category. The stuff about the freak show and the hair-covered baby who died. I mean, it was just, you're reading it, you say, what is this? This is like some garbage you'd expect to read on the internet, not something in a good daily newspaper.
I thought she did make some points. I did, but I thought she veered way off.
Well, I think that it would have had to be completely rewritten and edited for those points to come out in an acceptable way.
Well, I think the whole fallout or reaction to the Caitlyn Jenner story has been kind of a good news, bad news story. The good news is that compared with even, say, 10 years ago, I think it's been treated with a lot more sensitivity and just fundamental respect for the humanity of Caitlyn Jenner than you might have seen at an earlier stage, and that's a positive development. And bodes well for further tolerance and humanity toward transgender people. The bad news is, and I'd like to hear more from that editor of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette about this, is did they feel they had to go there, be so disrespectful, in order to get clicks? You know, we're in an era where sometimes it feels that way. And basic notions of respect for humanity and decency, basic fundamental decency, seem to be winding up on the cutting room floor. I hope that's not a trend. I like the positive trend. Don't like that one.
Yeah, I wonder, Dante, if you think they were surprised. There were so many calls for her firing. And we've seen this before with the controversial columnist Richard Cohen in the Washington Post, who wrote some comments about Bill de Blasio and his African-American wife. People were calling for his firing then. I mean, is that just an empty threat? I mean, or is that something that an editor would take seriously?
I don't think it's something that will be taken seriously. And I think in this case, it's a regrettable call for her to be fired over this particular column. I mean, I do think the column, having that sentiment that she expressed out there in a more respectful way, in a more thoughtful way, is probably something that people should talk about at this moment, because it's an important cultural moment. I think Graham, because of this column, missed that opportunity and has reinforced the idea that people who are critical or uncomfortable with Caitlyn Jenner are bigots rather than just people who are trying to adjust to a social phenomenon.
You know, calling for somebody's firing, I think, puts the focus in the wrong place. It isn't whether she should be fired or not. It's that these opinion pages in newspapers are incredibly valuable real estate. And when something like this happens, I think it's perfectly appropriate to ask, is this the best use that we can put to them? And maybe that means there is somebody better we could put in that space than somebody who would write this trash.
They just hired her. She's only been there 6 months.